I hope you enjoyed that video. I thought that was fantastic. I laughed when I saw that. I hope that you feel honored and loved today, not just the moms, but all the women who have motherly love and influence in our lives and in the lives of those that you care about. I want to get started today in this motherly love, motherly influence message by talking about something that might surprise you a little bit. It's something that we all do. You've probably thought about it before, but it's not the kind of thing we think about every day. And it's this. We all have guiding beliefs in our lives. We have deep down bedrock presuppositions. I like to just call them basic assumptions. And these basic assumptions that guide our lives are things that we cannot prove. Let me give you a couple of examples. One, laws of logic. You can't prove the laws of logic, and forgive me if I'm nerding out on you right now, but if you were to argue for the laws of logic or argue against the laws of logic, you would just have to assume them and use them. They're inescapable. Here's another one, and this is kind of a little funny. A belief that you have and a belief that I have is, I exist, you exist, but you can't prove it. How in the world would you prove that you exist? You can't. If someone were to come to you and say, hey, how can I know that I exist? Just ask them this question. Who's asking? If someone were to ask you, how can you know that you exist? Just say, who are you asking? We all have all kinds of deep down bedrock presuppositions or basic assumptions. I have a bunch in my life that guide my life, but I can't prove. Here's a couple of them. Not all of them, but here's two. If regret can be avoided, it should be. And motherly love is not defined by biology. If you're a woman, whether you are a biological mom or not a biological mom, your motherly love and impact in the lives of people you care about is just as genuine. It's just as real. The gift of who you are and the gifts that you give to others is priceless. And it cannot be restricted to. And it can't be defined by biology. And so today I want to encourage you. Today I want to inspire you. And as I do that, would you give me a second just to acknowledge an elephant in the room? An elephant in the room is that there are those of you who are watching right now and you are hesitant to tune in. That there are some of you who are watching right now and you're quick to tune out because when you hear the subject of motherhood or when you think about the relationship with your mom, it brings up hurt more than it brings up joy and celebration. And if that's you, I want to ask you to stick around with me for the next 30 seconds because I want to try and persuade you to watch the rest of this message. And the reason that I want to ask you to do that is because I believe, potentially, you could be one of the biggest, if not the biggest fans of this kind of message. Because you know what it's like for family relationships to go wrong. You know what it's like for good intentions to go bad. You know what it's like to be hurt. And there's something else that I know about you. Even if I don't know you, I bet this is true of you because it's true of all of us. You want good things. And you want good things for other people. If you could be king or queen for the day and you were given the power to make the world a better place, you would. And because you know what it's like for good intentions to go wrong, for good relationships to go wrong, for important relational opportunities to be missed, I bet you want as many people as possible to miss this right here. You want people to avoid regret. And today's message can be a way that could happen. And then there are those of you who are watching this and you're sympathetic to that reality, and yet it's not your experience at all. Your relationship with your mom is great. Your experience of motherhood is great. And because you've experienced it the way that it was meant to be, because you've experienced the positive side of that reality, because you know it's possible, you probably want as many people as possible to experience it as well, to know how to experience what you've experienced. And so whether you're in the camp that says, it's a day like today that causes me hurt, or it's a day like today that makes it easy to celebrate, there is a deep down desire that unites us all. I wouldn't expect you to know the name Kim Thompson. She is a pastor's wife, a worship leader, a teacher at a church in Northern California who I've known for a number of years. She's had an impact on my life. She's had an impact on the life of my wife. She's impacted probably more people than we can count. And she taught me something one time. And she may not be the first person to ever say this, but she's the first person to say it to me. She's the first person to teach it to me. And it's this right here. You teach what you know, but you reproduce what you are. And I get it. That's a statement that can land heavily with some of us, but it can also be a statement that puts wind in your sails. Today, I want it to be a statement that puts wind in your sails. I want to encourage you, and I want to inspire you. And none of us get it right all the time. That's impossible. So I want you to think about this. Let's approach the subject of motherly love and motherly influence like this. Purpose is greater than perfection. Would it be great if we got it right all the time? Yeah, that'd be nice. It'd also be nice if vegetables tasted like chocolate. Not going to happen. No parent parents perfectly. Your mom got stuff wrong. You and I, we get stuff wrong. You and I are going to get a lot more stuff wrong. Let's don't focus on perfection. Instead, let's focus on our purpose. And today, we're going to look at the purpose of motherly influence, motherly love. And we're going to look at it through the filter of Proverbs chapter 23. Now, much of Proverbs was written by a guy named Solomon. And something you got to know about Solomon is he comes from a family that was not perfect. They were jacked up. They got a lot of stuff wrong. Both he and his dad gave in to the cultural pressures and temptation of polygamy. His mom and his dad got together through an affair. His dad got his mom's first husband killed. One of his half-brothers tried to overthrow his dad. One of his half-brothers actually raped one of his half-sisters. It was a jacked-up family. And I bet, like me, you've probably got some jacked-up, messed-up stuff in your family. I share all of that with you just to say this. You're allowed to give yourself some grace. Today is a day that you get to be encouraged. Today is a day that you get to be inspired. Let's focus on purpose, not perfection. Proverbs 23 says this, listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Buy the truth and do not sell it, wisdom, instruction, and insight as well. The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. May your father and mother rejoice. May she who gave you birth be joyful. Now, it's fascinating to me. Maybe it's not fascinating to you. It's certainly interesting to me that he starts off by saying, do not despise your mother in her old age. Despise feels like a heavy word, and it is a heavy word. This is what it literally means. The Hebrew word literally means to look down on with contempt and see as significant. Now, in our culture, if you watch TV shows, there's a reason in our culture that we have jokes about sons who don't call their mothers often enough. There's a reason why some of you wives are looking sideways at your husband right now saying, see, he's talking about you. You need to call your mom. And you're doing it with that neck thing that you women know how to do that I don't know how to do. There's a reality of relational blind spots. There is a reality of taking people for granted. And that's a problem. And it deserves to be addressed and resolved. But I don't think that's what this is about. Why in the world does he say, do not despise your mother in her old age? What about when she's not old? Why is our disposition towards our moms, why is our disposition towards women of influence in our lives connected to old age? I think it's because we all start out as consumers. We all start out 100% dependent on the care and nurturing of someone else. Babies are served, babies don't serve. We all start out as takers. We all start out as consumers. And it doesn't mean that that love isn't real, but it's restricted to the consumer level. And consumer love is this. It's love that finds delight in what I receive. There's nothing wrong with starting here. We all start here. There's something terribly unhealthy with staying here. And where we're supposed to go in life, where we're supposed to mature to in life, is covenant love. And covenant love finds delight in what I give and what I receive. Covenant love says, I'd rather serve and sacrifice than you serve and sacrifice. Covenant love says, I find the most amount of joy in what I'm able to give to you. Covenant love says, I'd rather hurt than you hurt. If we don't move on from consumer love and graduate to adult level, mature covenant love, when we reach the point in life where our moms are those women of influence, their need to be nurtured outpaces their ability to nurture. Their need to be cared for outpaces their ability to give care. If we don't move on from consumer level love, we will despise them. Proverbs was written as advice from a father to a son. This was written to a young man. This was written to a young man whose mother probably is not old. And so this advice serves like a bright, blinking caution light in the middle of our path of life. It's like this. It's like it's asking us this incredibly important question. Are you on a path that is leading you beyond consumer love? Are you on a path that's leading you into delighting more in what you give than in what you get? Now, what we've talked about so far is just practical. Everybody can benefit from wisdom. There's benefit for everyone here. You don't even have to believe that the Bible is true in order to receive the benefit of this. But if you'll hang with me, if you'll stick in here with me for the next couple of minutes, I think there's even more to see. I think beyond the practical benefits, I think there's some theological benefits that we need to see as well. And to see that, I want us to go back to the very first page of the Bible, to go back to the very first woman, the very first mom in the Bible. Genesis 1:27 says this, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them." The debate has been this: is gender fixed or is it fluid? Is the distinction between gender something that's determined for us or something that's determined by us? Is the distinction between gender something that's meaningless or meaningful? And what I want you to know is that the God who made you in his image, the God who gave you priceless worth, the God who designed you to reflect his goodness, he says that that distinction, it's meaningful. And by his design, by the way that he intentionally set things up, we cannot see him and truly value him and understand him for all he wants to be understood. We can't see that without also valuing women. It's inseparable. Our ability to value him is connected in an inseparable way to our ability to value women. You cannot get one right while truly getting the other one wrong. All throughout the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, it's full of verses about wisdom. As a matter of fact, and right in the middle of the Bible, there's an entire book dedicated to wisdom. It's the book we're reading right now, Proverbs. And outside of the attribute of love, probably the most important attribute for a maturing follower of Jesus is the attribute of wisdom. Has it ever dawned on you how wisdom is talked about? Check this out. We're going to do a quick wisdom medley through Proverbs. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? Look in Proverbs chapter 9. Wisdom has built her house. She has set up its 7 pillars. She has. So let's look. What does she do? Wisdom personified as a woman. She has prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her servants, and she calls from the highest point of the city. Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, come, eat my food and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and you will live. Walk in the way of insight. We don't have time to look at Proverbs 31, but Proverbs 31 is an incredible celebration of a real woman who was incredibly wise. And all throughout the Old Testament, wisdom is personified as a woman, and not just as a woman. If you read all the things she does, she kind of sounds like a mom. Wisdom is designed by God for us to think about through the filter of a good and loving mom. But let me press into this just a little bit more. I want to jump into the New Testament to something that the Apostle Paul wrote. He said this: we preach Christ crucified. That's the most important message we can preach, that he was crucified on the cross for our sins. He rose from the dead. And that's a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God, and the wisdom of God. Jesus is the wisdom of God. And yet, all throughout the Old Testament, wisdom is constantly personified as a woman, as a mom, maybe. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that God is a woman, and I'm certainly not saying that Jesus is effeminate. But I am saying this: without the presence of a loving mom, or without the presence of a godly woman of influence in our life who loves us, we will be at a disadvantage at truly seeing and valuing wisdom. So if you want to be a person of wisdom, if you want to be the kind of person who avoids as much regret as possible, can I encourage you to do this? Do everything that you can to have the best relationship possible with your mom. And if that's not an option, do everything you can to have the best relationship possible with a godly woman of influence in your life. And ladies, as you're listening to this, as you hear me talk about this, and you feel like, Rick, you're laying a monumental task at our feet. It's not me, it's the Bible, but I mean, I get it. It is kind of a big deal. Talking about this, there's a guy named G.K. Chesterton. He was an English writer, a philosopher, a Christian thinker in the early 20th century. This is what he had to say talking about this. He said, now, if anyone says that this duty of general enlightenment is in itself too exhausting and oppressive, I can understand the view. I can only answer that our race has thought it worthwhile to cast this burden on women in order to keep common sense in the world. Moms, godly women of influence, we need you so that we can have this. Now, going back to Proverbs 23, the section that we read, it ended with this: may she who gave birth to you, may she who gave you life, may her life be filled with joy. So let's ask ourselves this question. How can my life saturate her life with joy? How can my life saturate her life with joy? Well, I think the answer is found in the passage that we looked at just a few minutes ago in Proverbs chapter 23. Immediately after saying, listen, don't despise your mom, it immediately begins to talk about wisdom. Our relationship with our mom, our relationship with godly women of influence is connected to wisdom. Check this out. Buy the truth and do not sell it. Wisdom, instruction, and insight as well. Buy the truth, don't sell it. Wisdom, instruction, and insight as well. If you want to have the kind of life that honors the gift of life that your mom gave to you, if you want to have the kind of life that fills with joy, a godly woman of influence who loves you and is invested in you, if you want to have that kind of life, that means pursuing these four things: truth, wisdom, instruction, and insight. And if you live that kind of life, and if you pursue that kind of life, you're going to honor the gift of life that your mom gave you, and you're going to fill with joy those godly women who love you. Now, all of these four concepts, they deserve books in their own right. They deserve messages in their own right. But for the sake of time, we're quickly just going to run through these four. Let's look at them together. As we look at these four concepts, I want to give us four different filters to think through them. The first one is truth. And as you think about truth, think about this. Be a hard target for deception. So let me ask you this question. Are you a hard target for deception? I want to give you a question to answer out loud with those whom you're watching this with right now. What does it feel like to be wrong? Go ahead and answer that question out loud with those who you're watching this with right now. I'll give you a second to do that. What does it feel like to be wrong? What kind of answers did you hear? Did you hear people say things like, oh, being wrong, it feels frustrating, it's embarrassing, it feels horrible, I hate that. If you heard answers like that, all of those answers are wrong. See, being wrong feels the exact same way as being right. It's realizing that you're wrong. That's what feels horrible. Being wrong feels fantastic. It's discovering that you're wrong. That's where the real pain is. That's where the real frustration is. And because we are all probably naturally on a happiness quest in life more than we are on a truth quest in life, there is a natural aversion inside of me, just like there might be a natural aversion inside of you to ignore the facts or to distance ourselves from people who shine a light on and expose the areas where we're wrong. Because any time that we believe something that's not true, that means by definition, we have been deceived. And when we hear that, when we know that, when we discover that, it just hurts. You know what we need? We need people in our lives. You need people in your life. I need people in my life whose love is just without question. It's beyond question. We know that they have our backs, and we know that they want the best for us. And because we know that they love us, and because we know that they have our backs, we need those kinds of people to help us see areas where we are out of sync with the truth so we can take our next step towards the truth. Moms, godly women of influence, the role that you play is massively important. You get to be that kind of influence for us. Motherly love is the kind of love that's defined by truth. and by grace. As we were looking at that verse in Proverbs 23, it starts off by saying, buy truth, buy wisdom, go and buy it. And it doesn't say that because you can actually go to a marketplace somewhere and exchange money in order to have those things. It's just another way of saying it doesn't come easily. It doesn't come naturally. No person is ever going to wander into wisdom. You don't drift into wisdom. It's going to take effort. It's going to take work. You're going to have to sweat for it. You're going to have to really lean in. Here's something I want you to think about. When we're talking about wisdom, what feels like a sacrifice now will feel like an investment later on. In order to be a person who is wise, in order to be that kind of person who puts in the kind of effort so that you can find and value and have wisdom for yourself, you're going to have to volunteer for discomfort. You're going to have to say no to yourself. You're going to have to give up things that you want right now so that you can invest in what you really value most. And if you have a mom in your life, if you have a woman who is a godly influence, who loves you with motherly influence in your life, whether she's your mom or not, she is rooting for you to get this. She's rooting for you to get this. Here's the thing. Here's a tension that all moms live in. Here's a tension that all godly women live in. They want to protect us from pain. And yet they realize that the price tag on wisdom means that we have to volunteer for discomfort. So let me ask you this. Do you ever say no to you? If you always go with what you feel, you won't always be wrong, but you'll never be wise. Let me give us a filter to think about instruction. And it's this right here. Value learning over knowing. Value learning over knowing. And this is one that I wish that I would have learned much earlier in life. My mom really worked hard to teach me this one. It's not her fault. I was just pretty hard-headed. And if your default setting is like my default setting, if what comes naturally to you is the same thing that comes naturally to me, we have work to do. And there isn't a problem with actually knowing stuff. Knowing stuff is awesome. Intelligence is awesome. But the problem with valuing knowing over being a learner, it actually makes learning impossible, because if you value being a knower highest above all, you'll never be able to improve because you always have to prove yourself. You always have to prove what you know. And one of the reasons, moms, one of the reasons you godly women of influence who love us with motherly love, one of the reasons that the attribute about you that makes you such a phenomenal teacher is your ability to offer correction with gentleness. And probably the best understanding of biblical gentleness, the biblical concept of gentleness, is the ability to help without causing someone to feel condemned. It's the ability to help and point out error without causing someone to feel crushed. You moms out there, you godly women of influence who love us with motherly love, this is one of the most priceless gifts that you give us. It's one of the reasons that you're such a valuable teacher. It's one of the reasons that your role is so valuable to us in order for us to grow in wisdom. Over the past 20 years that I've been in ministry as a pastor, as a youth pastor, as a pastor in the role that I am now, I've talked to probably countless parents. And one of the things that I've heard from parents countless times is this tension, it's this angst. They have mess-ups, these moral mess-ups that they made earlier in life, and they don't want to let their kids know about it, because if they let their kids know about it, they're afraid that their kids are going to use it as a license to make the same kind of choices. I want to give you, for those of you moms out there, for those of you godly women who value passing on instruction and wisdom and truth, I want to give you another way to look at it. What if, instead of hiding those errors and mistakes from your past, what if you were a little bit more open about them? What if you said, hey, these things that I've learned in life, I want you to know how I learned them. I learned them the hard way. I made these mistakes. I would never want you to make these mistakes, because this is what it cost me. This is how it hurt me. This is what I had to learn the hard way. And instead, I would rather you bypass that regret so that you can be on a fast track to wisdom and joy. And what I'm talking about is an approach that helps your kids. It's an approach that helps people who you care about develop insight. And insight is this. It's our ability to learn how to connect the dots between choices and outcomes. One of my favorite pastors is a guy named Andy Stanley. He's a pastor in the Atlanta area. He's a leadership expert. He's an author. One of my favorite books that he ever wrote is a book called The Principle of the Path. And inside of that book, there is one statement that is hands down my favorite line from the entire book, and it's this right here. It's your direction, not your intention, that determines your destination. It's your direction, not your intention, that determines your destination. There's something inside of me, and there might be something inside of you, that I want to evaluate myself purely by my intention in life. But what wisdom says is, no, your intention, that's important, but that's not really the determining factor. It's the direction you choose. And the less life experience you have, the less able you are to anticipate what the path you're on, where it's going to take you, the direction you're on, where it's going to take you. That's why we need older people who have gone ahead of us in life to point out those things before we get there. This is why all throughout, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, that children are commanded to obey their parents. It's the exact same reason that you read in the New Testament that older guys, older dudes, are told to invest in younger guys. It's the exact same reason that older women are told to invest and younger women. We need people to go before us who can help us understand before we get there, before we have enough life experience to know on our own where this path is taking us, so that we can have wisdom, so that we can live a life of insight. Somebody once said, experience is the best teacher, but there's no reason that the experience has to be your own. Isn't that great? Experience is the best teacher, but there's no reason that experience has to be your own. You know what we get to do? We get to, as we look to the people who've gone before us, as we look to our moms, as we look to those godly women of influence in our lives, they will happily pay the dumb tax for us if we just let them. They will happily say, listen, I've been down this road. I know where it is. If you trust me, I can help you avoid that. I can help you avoid regret. The thing about experience, it is a fantastic teacher, but it is a cruel teacher. Experience does not care about the scars that it leaves with you. But if you have a mom in your life, if you have a godly woman of wisdom who loves you with motherly kind of love in your life, you know what? Because she loves you, she's happy for you to learn from her scars. Let's end where we began, with these two basic assumptions. If regret can be avoided, it should be. And motherly love is not defined by biology. If you have a mom in your life, if you have a godly woman of influence who loves you with motherly love, who's willing to sacrifice and invest in you, do you know how you avoid regret? Do you know how you honor them? You trust them. I heard a pastor say one time, wisdom doesn't begin with information. It begins with submission. It begins with us saying, you know what? I'm going to trust and I'm going to follow you. If you have a mom in your life, if you have a godly woman of wisdom in your life who loves you, who invests in you, who cares about you with motherly love, you have an advantage. You have a secret weapon to have a life of wisdom and to have the kind of life that avoids this right here, the kind of life to avoid as much regret as possible. Now, this last bit, final couple of minutes, and then we'll be done. I want to speak from my heart to yours. One of the things that the writer of Proverbs says is, do not despise your mother in her old age. You know how we inoculate ourselves against contempt? Do you know how we inoculate ourselves against taking someone for granted? We practice gratitude. Do you know how we make ourselves immune to the relational cancer of taking somebody else for granted? It's not just the behavior of gratitude, it is making it a lifestyle. And so today, and tomorrow and moving forward, I hope that you will take advantage of the opportunities that you have to express gratitude for your mom and for the other godly women in your life who love you, who invest in you, who love you with motherly love. If you will pursue wisdom and truth and instruction and insight, you will honor the gift of life that your mom gave to you. If you pursue wisdom and truth and instruction and insight, you will fill with bursting joy the life of godly women who love and care about you. And let's make sure we don't miss the opportunity to express gratitude. I want to take that opportunity now. I just want to say thank you to my mom. Mom, I know that you're watching today. You are the first person to plant a love for God's word in my heart. You are the first person who taught me to memorize a Bible verse, and I know that I was an obstinate, goofy kid, and I may have made that miserable for you. And you were the first person to take me to church, and I know that there were times that you taking me to church, it probably broke your heart because you had to take me alone. You gave me life, and you made sure that I knew how I could have eternal life. I also want to take an opportunity to say thank you to my mother-in-law, Lily. Years ago, I don't even know if you remember this conversation, but you helped me push past my religious traditions and be able to value people more than I value my own preferences. You taught me that the most important person at church is the next person to walk through the door. You helped revolutionize for me what it means to be a pastor. And I want to say thank you. To everyone else, who do you need to express gratitude to today and tomorrow and as part of your lifestyle? And if you pursue truth and wisdom and insight and instruction, your life will be a life that says thank you to the one who gave you life. And it will be the kind of life that fills with joy the godly women of influence who love you. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of wisdom. We thank you for the presence of these precious, valuable women who are in our lives. Whether they're connected to us biologically or relationally, it's just as important. We thank you that you've put them in our life to help us better see wisdom so that we can value it and our lives could be filled with all the benefit of it. Help us to love them in return and to fill them with joy. And it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.